Hi everyone, I'm Ruchika Bindra and welcome to our debut episode of #NoFilter. Growing up as a teenager isn't always easy. Have you ever thought about who you are? How would you describe yourself? Join us today as we talk about one of the most important aspects about being a teen, their identity. Welcome back, everyone. I'd like to start by introducing our teen panelists today. They're going to help us decode the word identity. I have with us Nitka, Matthew, Rachel, and Viren. And it's my honor to as well introduce our guest panelist today, Ashley Hazard. She is a motivational speaker, a model, a life enthusiast, and she has also been all over the nation helping out with youths and has been a youth advocate. So welcome, Ashley. Thank you for being on our show.
Thank you for having me.
I'm going to start by asking, what is identity to you?
Well, I think identity is something that people, like everyone, builds throughout experiences that they encounter in life. And it has to do with character, which is also something that you build. And so it's really, your character and your identity is influenced by the people around you and what you want to show yourself as a person in general.
Okay, so when does this idea of identity and us beginning to really look at ourselves, you know, kind of in the mirror and say, okay, who am I? How do I kind of present myself? What are my likes? What are my dislikes? When do these sort of ideas start developing in minds?
I think it's something that really starts off in the formative years, but absolutely escalates and kind of explodes once the kids reach around age like 12, 13, junior high ages. It's once you start not only experiencing the world around you, but really getting a good idea as to what your likes and dislikes are, what it is that you're comfortable doing, what it is that you enjoy doing. It's when you start to hone that whole sense of identity internally.
And now you don't just have sort of that, you know, your parents that are kind of leading your identity for a long time, right? Especially during our childhood, we always sort of have the shadow of our parents, and we're kind of we're beginning to understand the world around us through them. But as soon as we're teens, it's like, bam, we're out there on our own, and there's all these different views, and, you know, they're brought up differently, and you're brought up differently, and I think it's a complex process. And I was reading an article yesterday on Psychology Today, and it says that more and more scientists are trying to study the teen brain because it's one of the most important aspects of a human development. And they say that the teen brain develops back to front, with our impulses and reactions to things being the last. So when our parents say, you're so emotional, or, you know, you're so rebellious, or our impulses as teens are so quick, they say that it's actually more than just our upbringing. It's actually something going on in our development. So that led me to ask that this isn't necessarily as simple as we think it is, the idea of identity. If I were to ask you guys, what are the 4 things that you would say influence identity? What would you guys say they are?
Well, definitely media is first. Like
on top.
Number 1 on your list?
First thing, like,
Okay.
I haven't even thought of my list before, but media is definitely first because, I mean, you're always looking at media, whether you're watching TV or you're watching a movie or you're on your phone or you're on the internet or something like that. And I think the media and seeing what celebrities, people you idolize, how they react to different situations and how they are as people, I think that it affects your identity on the outside especially a lot.
Okay. Yeah, I think for me it's mostly my friends, since they're the people who I spend most of my time with.
So your social clique.
Exactly, yeah. So like whatever they do, I would want to like make it similar to them, so that, I mean, before, especially when I want to like experience like who I am, like figure it out, I wanted to be like, well, that seems cool to me, so I'll be more like that. Right. And so like I saw different people, and I'd be like, well, what's better, you know? What do I want to be portrayed? Like, what do I want other people to see me as? So that's more how I developed who I was.
There's also that whole idea of nature versus nurture, like the things around you forming your identity versus how you're brought up.
Absolutely.
So like I believe in both. Like I believe the way you're brought up does help you shape your identity, but also the factors around you very much like play a part in who you are and what your identity is and how you see yourself and others perceive you.
Because they're molding it, right? You're molding your identity with every experience and every change that you go through. So then you brought up a great point, which leads me to my next question. How do we go from figuring out our likes versus our social group's likes versus what we're brought up to believe, especially when we're all from such a difference of culture, and it's the culture is so diverse everywhere we go today. It's like, okay, that's how you do it. Okay, cool. That's how I do it.
That's a tough one. It's really tricky because, again, like, you don't know whether it's something that you actually do intrinsically like, whether it's something that's being influenced by people around you. I think the idea is just get comfortable with your internal voice. Listen to it, be aware of it, know whether something feels good, doesn't feel good to you, if you're interested in it, if you're not interested in it. And if you look at something that you're doing and you see, like, oh, I don't know if I actually like what I'm doing here, it's okay to rework it. It's okay to reschedule. It's okay to reevaluate and figure out who it is you are. Because it's by trying new things, trying things that you like, trying things that you don't like, that you're going to hone who you actually are.
Exactly.
I think also throughout your experiences, you have everybody's voices in your head, right? So you have your own voice, obviously, in your head. You have your parents' voice, you have your friend's voice, you have the media's voice, everything all around. So when you're doing whatever you're doing, you think everybody's screaming in your head, oh, you should do this. Oh, you shouldn't do this. I think you should do this. And I think you sort of take a little bit of everything, and it comes in.
Mold it up.
It molds into your own identity and how you feel about that certain scenario.
And to what you were saying, like, you learn off your mistakes. So you might do some things that you might not like, but before you do it, you don't know that that's incorrect or
until you've done it
doesn't go with your personality, character. Yeah. And then after you realize, oh, this isn't really who I want to be, so I'll change it up later.
And it's totally okay to change it up. People do it all the time, from when they're young toddlers learning not to do things, or teenagers, adults do it even. It's okay to redefine your identity and redefine who you are.
And I think that's a great point, Ashley, because a lot of teens, we beat ourselves up for it.
Yeah.
We're almost like, that happened to me, and we kind of don't realize that it's part of the evolution and it's part of molding and growing.
Absolutely.
So from media to forbidden behaviors that teens do to our social cliques, stay with us, as on the other side of the break we look at all these aspects and more. Before we cut to break, I have one quick question for you guys that I want you guys to think about. If you were to choose between zoning out of the media for an entire week, zoning out of seeing your friends, or zoning out of hanging out with your parental and social influences, like your teacher, or maybe if you play sports, your coach, sort of your power figures, which one would you find the most challenging to cut out because it has the strongest influence on your values and sort of qualities that help form your identity? So I want you guys to think about only one that you could pull out. And we're going to look at that, the idea of forbidden behaviors when teens rebel, when they kind of do things out of the norm and their parents are like, what just happened to my kid? Like, that's not the kid I knew. We're also going to look at something that I think is really important, and it's classification through our society, right? So as you said, the friends we hang out with, what they like, what they dislike. We're going to look at that and so much more on the next part of our break. So when we leave, I want you guys to promise me you're going to think about one thing. What can you zone out to tell me what makes your identity the most challenging for you? So we'll be back, everybody, on the other side where we talk about all those things and so much more. Stay tuned on #NoFilter. Welcome back, everyone. You're watching #NoFilter. Before the break, we looked at identity, the idea of identity, and what influence it has on the lives of teenagers. Before we left, I left our teens with a big question. What can you guys cut out? The one thing that influences you the most. So who's going to try to tackle this one?
Well, I would say one of the most difficult things to cut out would definitely be media. So during the summer, I went away to a camp, and we weren't allowed to bring our phones or any contact with other outside world. So it was very difficult, but I would say it definitely changed the way I thought about things and changed my identity as a person, because I learned how to communicate with people better and make friends, not following them on Instagram or adding them on Snapchat, like be able to actually have a real conversation with them. It was difficult at first, like letting go of my phone, because I am very addicted to my phone.
I think we all are.
But in the end, it definitely left a positive impact on my life.
Do you feel like you become friends with people now a little bit more differently? Like back in the day, you go to class and you sit next to a girl and you're like, hi, I'm Richika. You start talking, and now it's like, oh, I saw that girl in class. I found her on Instagram. Let me follow her, or let me add him on Snapchat. Do you guys find like we're friends now through social media before we are in person?
Oh, for sure. Like if I'm like not following somebody on Instagram, we're not friends, right? Like,
Okay.
like if I don't get an Instagram follow, you know, we're not friends. So,
Matthew, you and me are not friends yet.
it seems so.
Damn it.
It's like
Maybe one day.
Hi, I'm Richard.
Matthew.
Nice.
All right,
meet
so
you.
now it's real.
Right?
on Facebook.
There. In real life, yes. In real
Do you
life,
think
it's real.
Is it good having these kind of like dual dimensions where in one world it's you're friends, in one world you're not?
Well, I
you're
think
not.
partially because some people can be portrayed on social media not exactly how they are in person. So if I had not had a real conversation with somebody, but I just, you know, scrolled through their Instagram pictures, I might portray them as something, but when I talk to them, they could be completely different, right?
Right.
So it changes completely.
So for you, media, that's the one that you'd find challenging to cut out because you saw what it was like?
It was challenging, but in the end, it is a positive way to figure out how to communicate better in person.
Because you were figuring out your identity through actual experiences, I guess, on the camp and with people
Exactly.
around you and doing activities, right? Versus kind of cluing into your phone.
When you're on your phone and like your identity is so different online than it is in person. Like for me, I have a lot of photos on Instagram, but those photos don't exactly reflect who I am in person. So I would say cutting out media is hard because everybody is on it and everybody perceives people as what they are on the media. But once you do cut it out, it is so worth it.
I have a question for you. Something you said struck with me. You said, I have all these pictures on Instagram that don't necessarily mean that's who I am. So then is it an identity that you're kind of doing because it sort of fits in with what's going on around you? Or is it kind of like, I'm going to be like Beyonce and have my alter ego, like I'm Sasha Fierce, and then I'm you know?
I feel like it's more everybody's doing it,
Yeah.
so you should do it as well. Even though it's not exactly what I would like to post on Instagram, I still do because everybody else is. Kind of
Okay.
thing.
So, Viren, I'm going to ask you the same question. As a guy, I know it's a little bit different, right? Like when
Right.
guys engage with the media and the media helps them form their identity, how does it work for guys? Do you find like it has equally of an influence for you?
Oh, for sure. Like I guess when you see the like male artists versus female
Yeah.
artists, right? Like you can easily see like the different types, right? So you have like the gangsters, you have
Yeah.
like the jazz musicians, you have all these guys. So
The EDM and the
EDM,
house,
exactly,
yeah.
right? So I guess like the type of music you listen to, you get affected with that and through that. So I guess through the different type of media that you follow, like depending on the type of music that you listen to or movies that you watch, that you get affected by that. So I feel like so it is sort of equal. I don't think that.
So you don't feel like women engage more in forming their identity through the media versus guys? You find
Yeah,
like it's
I
pretty
feel
equal?
like it's pretty equal.
It's just you guys take something different from it, maybe
Yeah.
through music versus her. It could be, through images and photography
Exactly.
and social media. Okay. My other question is, what about clicks? This is big. Our social clicks. How do we, if we were to cut that out, who would find that the most challenging here? To cut out their social click?
So friends, not talking to them.
Well, I feel like when you're on social media, it's more like a group as a whole. It's not like cliques are. Personally, I feel like it's more in person where you have like a group of people who you always hang out with.
Right.
Well, rather than on social media, it's like as a whole, because everyone sees what you do, whoever you follow or whoever follows you, everyone sees that, and you can't hide anything away unless like you put some sort of setting or something. Yeah. But other than that, it's like whatever you put out there, everyone can see, so it's nothing private, really.
So cliques are more
Like,
personal?
Yeah, cliques are more personal.
So would that make them more valuable to your identity or less?
I guess it depends on if you put yourself more out on social media rather than in person.
Like you lay low more in person
Yeah.
versus you have this image of who you are in this presentation on social media.
Yeah.
Kind of like an alter ego, kind of like a Sasha Fierce.
Just like Sasha Fierce.
But is that a bad thing? Is it a kind of like, okay, I might be the shy girl and I might be really quiet and, my identity might be somebody in person who's a little bit more timid, but I want to explore this other idea and I want to explore this other idea of being somebody else. Is it bad that we kind of live, as she said, sort of, this identity a little bit differently through the media and with the media because we participate with it?
Not at all. Personally, I think the media it can be a really great thing for teens and for everyone just to explore different avenues of life, different lifestyles, different experiences, different opportunities, different people. But I just think it's really important to remain aware that what people are putting out in the media and on their social media pages and things like that, it's their highlight reel. So what you need to be aware of is that you're not comparing your behind the scenes that you see every day with someone else's highlight reel, because you're not going to be getting the same comparison. And it can lead to a really low self-esteem and a really low self-impression of what life is like if you're always doing that.
Absolutely. And then what about your cliques, like your friends? So let's say I were to say, okay, Matthew and Vern, for an entire week, you guys don't see your friends, you guys don't talk to them at all. Or maybe even, let's even push it to like a month. Do you think your identity would be challenged now because you're kind of by yourself and you're experiencing things by yourself and you don't have that influence? Or would you kind of be like, I'm good without it?
Well, one question, does texting count?
Oh,
Yes, it does.
Because
you know,
there's
in
still
person, there's one thing.
Yeah.
Texting is an entirely different thing.
Well, it's a bit of both. No engagement to your friends. So you're a group of, let's say, you and your 5 guys, you guys are really thick, you guys talk on text, in person, in school. Would you be able to cut them out?
Well, I mean, I feel like it'd be a little bit difficult because sometimes the voices inside my head and the questions I have are easily answered with my friends because I can relate to them. Right. Obviously, we're good friends. We have a lot in common, and I can talk to them about my interests. I can talk to them about my problems. And I feel like without that, there's a big void that's left to be filled by probably only myself. And I think that that would be something very difficult to do. So I don't think that would be a good 5 days.
A good 5 days. No. What about for you, Vera? Do you think you can do it?
Yeah, same like with Matthew. I don't think I could do it, honestly, because I think because I've been around and exposed to my friends so much, and because like we see them almost every day if we go to school or extra sports or whatever it is. So I feel like your likes are may be similar or could be different to them. So I feel like the interest that they have may be veered off, and you can maybe focus on yourself.
You bounce off of it, basically, off each other. Yeah, that's a great point. So from media to cliques to our friends to figuring out our alter ego and our alter identity, it's definitely a challenging aspect for many teens. We're going to look on the other side of the break on the idea of forbidden behaviors and how we can figure out who we are by ourselves. Stay tuned, everyone. Welcome back, everyone. You're watching #NoFilter, and I'm Ruchika Bindra. Before the break, we looked at the idea of identity, influences of identity such as social media, our family and friends, cliques, and figuring out who we are through the challenging phases of being a teen. I'm going to ask you my favorite question, because I was totally like this, being a teen. What about being a rebel? How do we feel about being a rebel, and why do we do it? Why do so many teens do rebellious acts and sort of acts that are considered, a problem, and where do they sort of find it helps them shape or doesn't help them shape their identity?
Well, I think it's something that we touched on before, the different voices in your head, right?
Yeah.
So maybe something your parents will say is very conflicted, something your friends will say, and you'll be like, well, I trust my parents, they've raised me to become the person I am, but there's also my friends, and I trust my friends, I have the same interests as my friends, we're very similar. So sometimes you don't know sort of which route to take, and I think sometimes if you take some of the voices in the media or your friends, it'll go against what your parents say and therefore seem rebellious to them.
So do you think that a lot of teens realize that what I'm doing is a little bit rebellious, or it's like, no, I'm just exploring, I'm just experimenting something really cool?
Well, I think in hindsight, we know what we're doing is rebellious, but it also shapes our character. We do this because we want to explore ourselves and we want to see what we're comfortable doing, and sometimes being rebellious, we can see what other people's reaction is towards what we do. So I think that way we can also shape ourselves by being sometimes rebellious.
What about the concept of freedom? Because I find whenever I look at this idea of being rebellious and exploring ourselves, this aspect comes on, they're trying to explore their freedom, right? Because they're trying to work more towards that adulthood where I can explore and I can do these things, and I don't have that parental or that, that coach or that father figure, that influence telling me, no, this is against it. So do you think through these rebellious phases, it's almost helping to shape their identity, or can it sometimes actually work against them?
Well, I think obviously when it comes to anything to do with rebellion, there's always a little bit of risk involved because there is just risk. But at the same time, it's really good for character building because, again, how we make mistakes is how we grow. Someone might do something that they won't necessarily agree with, or their family won't necessarily agree with, but if they learn something from that experience, that can build into their character. It can help them become a better person or a person that they want to be more of.
And as she said, in hindsight, sometimes we do realize it. And I mean, we do that as adults too, right? We'll do something and then we'll sit down a week later and be like, oh God, that was bad. The way I handled that was absolutely not okay. So have you ever done something really rebellious that you can remember?
I think I have done some rebellious things. I can't, give a specific example, but like I guess through doing that activity, whether it was right or wrong, influenced by our parents, influenced by our friends, regardless to say, like I guess doing that activity and then finding out the end result, then you get to then determine if that activity was actually a good thing or a bad thing. So then we get to then differentiate between right and wrong.
Like, was it worth the risk that you took?
Exactly,
You kind of sit there and you're like, okay, this was not a good choice. Or this was worth it. I had, best time of my life coming home at 11 instead of coming home at 11, like 10:30. It was great. Prom night was fun.
One negative thing about that, though, is if you do something that ends up not being worth it in the end, people sometimes get to know you by that one thing. And then that is your identity to everyone. Everybody sees you as, oh, she's the girl who did that thing.
Identity labeling,
And
right?
it's such a and then you're stereotyped from then on to be doing those things, even if you're not. So that tends to happen, especially a lot in teens. And it does hurt a lot of people that way because they don't want to be perceived like that, but because they did that one thing, made that one mistake, they're all of a sudden perceived that as their identity.
I also think a big thing for me personally is, I do care what other people say, but not to a large extent, but also I'm my own biggest critic. So if I did something that, I wasn't a big fan of, or why did I do that? You only have yourself to blame.
Right.
You will sit down, you'll go to sleep, you'll be like, okay, tonight was interesting. Why did I do this? Why did I do this? Like, you look back in hindsight, and often you are your biggest critic, and you are the one telling yourself, next time I got to do this instead of this. And when you rebel, sometimes it'll be your parents that give you consequences, but sometimes it'll be yourself having to deal with your own consequences.
Absolutely. It's all about that internal debrief, I think, with any situation, be it good or bad. It's all about how you reflect on it and what you take from it, because you can turn a tragedy into a triumph if you take the right things out of it and build resilience.
And I always say, even as adults, especially as teens, because that's the time of our life where we're really learning and we're really challenging ourselves and we're really putting ourselves out there, is that play your day or play your life or look at activities you've done sort of like a replay of a film, right? And go through it and be like, okay, that's what happened there. That's where the climax happened. This is where I, learned from this, and walk yourself through it. And as she said, it's those voices in your head that are going to keep you going. And ultimately what you're doing is forming who you are through these pushes and pulls and, shaping your identity, which leads me to ask you, because I know you're really good at this. You're always good at getting us to look at ourselves. In a lot of the, speeches you've given and works you've done, you kind of get people to start looking at who they are versus who they shouldn't be. So I have a feeling you're going to pull one of that, so just do it now.
Okay, so the number one thing that I like to do when trying to help people figure out who they are as individuals is to grab a piece of paper or just in your head, think of the top 3 ways that you think society would either label you or identify you as. And then on the flip side of that paper or the flip side of your mind, try to think of the top 3 ways that you would identify yourself as.
And what if they don't match?
That's something that you're going to have to deal with internally. I think it's something that we all want to strive for. Ideally, in the perfect world, those 2 images match perfectly. And that's how you reach a state of flow that will really make you feel like a confident person being in the state that you want to be in.
So basically trying to find the flow between your personal identity and your social identity.
Precisely.
And once we hit that equilibrium, then we're kind of...
Then you're good, and that's when you're going to receive, like, perfect internal happiness, essentially. And it's okay if they don't line up right away. It's totally fine, because for most people, they don't. But the idea is to always try to be striving to be that ideal version of yourself, and that's how you can become it, essentially.
And you almost hope that the ideal version you think you are of yourself, or you're shaping to be, kind of matches with how society is going to appreciate you and sort of take you in that way. Because as Rochelle said, right, a lot of the times we play a different character that we are because we're on Instagram, or we're on this realm, or we're around different people and they like different things, and so our identity kind of conflicts with the social identity world, and I think that's where a really big challenge is.
Absolutely.
And another question I have, really quick, is if I were to ask you one thing about your identity that you love, what would it be? One word. I need one word.
Good question.
I would say that I'm, like, people think of me and I think of myself as, like, a really outgoing, loud person.
Okay, one word, outgoing. That one's yours.
Outgoing. Yeah, we go that way.
Open.
I'd say, free.
I got one, easygoing.
Perfect. All right. So between struggling to find our personal identity with our social identity, we wrap up our show today of #NoFilter.
Untitled.